Hey guys, welcome to the 2 a.m. pipe on the patio. Today, smoking my Morta poker that I got from Smartie Bob in one of his giveaways a while ago. And in it, I am smoking Gumbo and Hogarth's Brown Flake Unscented. I'm drawing a lot of bees to me. I think it's this shirt. They've been buzzing around me. They've been coming in here. So I'm using a microphone today because the wind has picked up mightily. I came out and did a bunch of work this morning, try and get ahead of the thunderstorm we're supposed to have, and then the wind just picked up and it has been blowing like crazy. It's just blowing like nuts out here. Now it calms down. So I don't know what the sound is going to be like. I haven't used this microphone with this camera, with this phone, since I got this phone. The phone was doing a pretty good job. I have to, when I do my videos, I have to boost the volume quite a bit when I put them up. I'm going to see if this helps with that. I have to almost double the volume when I make my video. So this is an old, I think it's called the Purple Panda, something like that. Purple Panda microphone. But it's so old that I have to get an adapter. I had to buy an adapter to make it work with this phone. It has to plug in, and the plug-in on it is just one of the little tiny little jacks that plugs in for here, like you had for the old headphones. So I had to get an adapter for it to plug into, to make it plug into the new charging cord style thing they use for Apple. So let me know what the sound is like. Let me know if I should go back to just doing it on the camera or continue to use the microphone. Let me know which one you guys prefer. I'm using an old Cowboy boot Bic lighter holder that I got from a lady I worked with years ago. She knew I collected lighters, and she came in one day with that, and she asked me if I would like it, and I said, heck yeah. And it's super heavy. I can't believe how heavy this thing. It's got to be brass or something covered in, it's silver colored, but it's heavy. I thought it was pewter when I first saw it, but it's too heavy for pewter. So it's got to be brass or something, man. This thing is just, I mean, it's heavy. You could hurt somebody with that thing. But I always had a Zippo in my pocket, and I was always clicking it and playing with it and doing tricks with it and stuff. Just for nervousness sake, you know. And the sound always reminded me of my dad. You know, that I can't do it now. That noise, whenever I hear that, it takes me back to my dad as a kid, lighting his cigarettes. And my whole family had Zippos. My dad, my aunts and uncles, and they had all kinds of different lighters. I wish I had them now, all the lighters they had. I've got one of my dad's lighters, which I'm so thankful for, and it's not a Zippo, but it's one of the Scripto ones that you could see the fluid in, and he was an electrician, and he worked for the state of California, and he worked on all the bridges up and down California, but he started on the Oakland San Francisco Bay Bridge. And then we moved to San Pedro, which is in LA. When I was 4, we moved there. And he worked on the Vincent Thomas Bridge, which is in Long Beach Harbor. And then in 1969, they opened the San Diego Coronado Bay Bridge. And he transferred down to there and opened that bridge, and was the electrician on that bridge. And the Vincent Thomas Bridge was a suspension bridge. You know, it had the big towers on it and the ropes that would go between the two towers. And so during the summer, he'd call home and he'd tell me we could see the towers of the bridge from where we lived. It was far away, but you could see it. And he'd tell me, "Hey Johnny, I'm going to be climbing up the towers, so watch for me." And he would climb up those, you know, they'd have 2 wires and then a big round like tube that you climbed on to get to the top. He'd have to go up there and change lights or do something up there, electrical. And so I'd go out on the front lawn and I'd start watching, and you could just see this little dot on those wires. And you could just see him walking. You could see him climbing that. And when he'd get to the top, he'd turn around and he'd wave. And you couldn't really tell it was anybody on there unless you knew somebody was going to be going up it, and you watched and you could see that little dot moving, you know. He'd always tell me, when I get to the top, I'll wave to you. And I'd say, "Can you see me from there?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, I can see our front yard and Yeah, I'm sure he couldn't, but as far as I was concerned, he could see me, and so I'd be waving to him, and all the kids in the neighborhood would come out, and I'd say, "That's my dad. You see that?" And it was just the coolest thing in the world, and but he'd climb up those things, and it would take a good while for him to get up those things. And they had those big, blinking lights at the top for airplanes and stuff, and every once in a while they'd have to go up and change those, and any other stuff that they had to do. I don't know what all he had to do up there, but that was part of his job, was going up and changing those lights. And he took care of all the computers on the bridges, and which were huge, massive. They had an entire room. It's funny now to think about, but back then they had a big, huge room in the basement. They'd have the bridge. I don't know what you would call it, where the sergeants and everybody hung out on the bridge, and then down below there was a basement, and it was just filled with these big, huge computers that were, the size of bank vaults. I mean, they were massive, big, huge computers, and they just each lane of the bridge where they took a toll had its own computer. And kept track of all the money and all the cars that came through and all that stuff. But it was a big, massive thing. And they had these big, huge rolls of paper in them. I mean, they were big. They had to be 4 foot long. And they were probably, a foot and a half, 2 inches, or a foot and a half, 2 foot around. And they'd load those in there, and that would record the entire day's transactions or whatever, however long. So, and that's how they kept track of everything. It was a computer, but everything was on paper, Every once in a while, a computer would go down, and they'd call Dad up and, "Hey, computer on lane 2 went down." He'd say, "Okay, I'll be right in." So he had a state truck that he drove, and so he'd say, "Hey, Johnny, I got to go in." That was between 4 and 9 at this time when we were living in LA. Say, "Hey, Johnny, I got to go into the bridge. Want to go with me?" And it meant I got to drive in the state truck, which had a flashing light on it. So it was like, yeah, heck yeah, it even had a siren. So we'd get on the bridge and he'd turn on the lights, because we were on the bridge. And when we'd get up to the to where the lobby was for the bridge, he'd always run that siren for me for a little bit, as we were pulling in. And I miss my dad. He was an incredible father, and he died too young. He died when I was 25, and he was 60 years old. Never got to retire. Never got to do any of the things he dreamt of doing in his retirement, you know. He loved to go camping. He would love where I live right now. He would love this place. He would love sitting out here watching the animals and the birds and the deer and the foxes and squirrels, and he would just be in heaven here, you know. Miss my dad. But yeah, he used to take me to work with him. Whenever he could. Whenever he could, he would take me to work with him. You know, I'd sit at the counter. They had a big counter there with like almost like bar stools type things for people to sit at. And I'd just sit and talk to the sergeants or whoever was there. And there was one sergeant there who was from Louisiana. He was an African American gentleman and just the nicest man. And we used to go up to this creek by our house and we'd catch, I think I've told this story, I may have told this story. We'd catch crawfish. And we'd bring him a bucket of crawfish. And he'd make gumbo with that crawfish. And Dad would come home with like a gallon container, a big old pot. It's probably bigger than a gallon, but it was a big pot of gumbo that he had made for our family. Since we caught him the crawfish. God, that stuff was so good. Man, that was good stuff. And but I'd just sit and talk to the sergeants or whoever happened to be in there, you know, the guys that worked there. My dad was a good man who loved his family. Was a World War II veteran. fought in the African theater and in the Pacific. Man, he loved to joke around and be the life of the party. He was the exact opposite of me. He'd always be singing and dancing, and he could whistle like a bird. He'd go into a restaurant and he could whistle like a bird, and you didn't know he was whistling. And every time the waiter or waitress would come over to order, he'd start doing that whistle, and they'd be looking around for a bird. He's been gone almost 40 years. 39 years this year. I'd give anything to be sitting in the top deck of the baseball stadium watching a baseball game with them like we used to do when I was a kid. I loved sitting in the top deck. I used to ask to sit in the top deck. I just thought that was the best place to sit as a kid. You could see everything. You could just see everything that was going on the field. Sitting in that top deck. At what was then San Diego Stadium. Got to see so many great players. Oh man, so many Hall of Famers. We'd buy peanuts and Cracker Jacks, and Cokes and hot dogs, and seats were $1. It was $1 to sit in the top deck. Peanuts were $0.25. I don't remember how much hot dogs were, but they were probably $1, if that. Good times. Anyway, that one got away from me. I will catch you guys later. Have a good one. God bless. Take care.